Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Abington School Building Committee meeting, Thursday, April 16th, 2015. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the March 10th, 2015 School Building Committee meeting minutes. If we have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Kathy. All in favor?
Motion by David.
Motion by David, correct. All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, just want to give you a quick update on the Conservation Commission, Zoning, and Planning Board hearings. We were scheduled to have a Conservation Committee meeting on this Monday the 13th. Because we had not yet met with Zoning and Planning, it was felt that it would be better to continue that meeting to a later date. So they immediately opened the Conservation Committee meeting and then postponed it until a later date. We did meet with both the Zoning Board and the Planning Board on Tuesday evening, and both boards ultimately approved the variances that were requested. There was some abutters present, and there was very good discussion, primarily surrounding three key components. One was traffic concerns, one was concerns regarding noise, one was concerns regarding light pollution, and the fourth was regarding the water or the wetness. And much to our professional team's credit, I think they did a very good job in alleviating all of those concerns. Obviously, because the current site doesn't have any underwater drainage systems, that situation will be very much improved. There was the town's representatives from Bales and Thomas were there. They spoke regarding the improved water conditions as a result of those changes. So I think that very much alleviated their concerns around that. Again, traffic. I think we all acknowledge that if you have a larger population there are going to be more vehicles. We're fortunate that most of the middle school students, I'm told, don't drive. So the concern regarding traffic is really confined to, some additional buses and the parental drop-off of the middle school students. But again, that's because we're having the staggered times, which again works well not only from a traffic flow perspective, but we have to do because of the busing schedules and the number of buses. We use the same buses to transport both the middle school and high school students, so we would have to do multiple bus runs anyways. So that seemed to address their concerns regarding traffic. And then noise and light. And regarding the lights, there was some questions about light pollution. Obviously the lights that will be installed are far superior to any of the lights that we have in the town presently. Someone used the analogy of the Frollo, and there's certainly some light spillage or pollution that presently exists. That won't happen with the current site and the lights that are proposed there. There was a question from a member of the zoning board or the planning board regarding the height of the light towers and whether or not that would create light pollution because the towers are so high. And what they actually commented is the higher the light towers, the better, because you're better able to focus the light directly down to the spot that you're looking to light, as opposed to if you have the towers lower, now you're shooting the light horizontally, essentially, to try to light up a space, and that could create some spillage. So the higher the tower is, actually, the better you're able to control the light and ensure that there isn't light pollution. And then the final concern was around noise pollution, and certainly just by where the building is situated on the lot, because the building is now moving back, and if you're facing the building to the left, so that's pulling the building away from Lincoln Village in some respects. So the building will actually be further away from Lincoln Village than as it presently exists. There was also some comments regarding the trash pickup, which now occurs on the right-hand side of the building if you're facing it, which is directly abuts Lincoln Village, because the trash will now be essentially on the back right side of the building. That situation should improve for the abutters as well. And what I would suggest, and I think we'll certainly keep in mind and look to include in the project, is I think it would be in the best interest of the abutters and us as good neighbors, to consider looking at some trees, along that property line in between the parking lot area and the Lincoln Village abutters. And I think as we further progress in the project, that's something that we'll certainly want to consider. They've been very good neighbors, to the high school, and they've been very complimentary of the high school as neighbors. And I think we want to be good neighbors to them as well. So that's a quick update. It actually, all things considered, the meetings actually went very, very quickly. We spoke with the abutters after they were still present. I think they were very complimentary of the process. They were able to get a lot of their questions answered. So I think those went very, very well. I'd like to turn it over to Troy for a design update.
Okay. Tonight we want to go through a couple of spaces that we've been developing and that we met with the working group to discuss. And that is, if you recall, the last meeting we focused on the core central areas of the building, the more public spaces. Tonight we're going to focus on the classroom wing and the middle school, high school portions of the building, and primarily the corridor and the maker space or the project area for the middle school located here. And if you recall, going back, way back when, we're talking about the overall size of the plan, the significance of the scale of the building, and trying to make sure that we break down the scale within the building with daylighting, with views, with the adjacency of spaces, and the path in which a student or somebody in the building would take in their experience through those spaces. And breaking down the wings of the middle school, high school, and the views out where down this corridor you can see through and outside the building, down the central core you can see through and outside the building on either side, and likewise in either of these spaces seeing through and outside the building with natural daylighting and views going out. Same situation on the high school side. So we've really effectively broken this building down into really small, manageable components that gives you a really nice sense of place and wayfinding through the building. That continues as we look at the individual zones. As an example, this corridor, although small in length as it is now, and this corridor, looking at the way that breaks down in scale as well is important, because traditionally, the institutional breakdown of a classroom wing was the stacking of classrooms along a corridor, a double-sided corridor. What we've done here is we've benefited from the efficiency, the layout and efficiency of that with double-loaded corridors and the square footage, but we've changed the way we look at that corridor, and primarily the way the corridor wall, demising wall between the corridor and the classroom is positioned. And you can see with this rendering here that each of the corridor walls opens up a corner to the classroom. So when you're looking down the corridor, you don't just see two parallel walls going down the corridor in a very very closed-in institutional fashion. And same with the end of the corridor. Being able to see through along the corridor and through to the outside with natural daylighting and views is extremely important. And you can see by doing that, we have effectively broken down the corridor into 3 zones within each of the wings. And we've allowed us to provide visual connection between the classrooms and the corridor. We've adjusted the ceiling in a very standard 2x4 integral linear fixture ceiling system here, using the patterns in the floor as well with the sheet linoleum product to create the zones and color variations, durable materials on the walls with porcelain paver tiles down low, and then a durable impact-resistant drywall for the walls. Impact-resistant drywall is a more dense material than standard drywall or gypsum, and it has a fibrous product in it to make it more dense and extremely tough to damage. You can see the locker. We obviously have to provide storage for students, so the locker banks. We've utilized some variation in colors to mix up the visual effect along the corridor. Then using the lighting to articulate and support the breakdown of scale and the overall length of that corridor. Passive and active displays along the corridor, so the student work can be displayed in a display case. And let's see, so that occurs at each of the wings within each of the classroom bays. And then moving to, can everybody see that's a good, do these need to be tipped forward a little bit?
No, that's fine.
Good? Okay. Good. So I was sitting there and saw a little bit of a glare. So working to the center core of the academic wing is the project labs, the maker-builder spaces. And there are 3 vantage points of the maker-builder space. If you remember, the intention is to provide as much flexibility within this central core as possible, so that one classroom can come and do a project, multiple classrooms, or in fact you could take the floor or the academy and bring them into the center core with everything opened up as an assembly space. And what you see here are the 3 renderings. The first rendering, the top one here, is looking on the second floor across the space into this area here, this maker-builder space. And each of this is showing the floor penetration from the second floor to the first floor, and you can see through into the spaces on the lower level, as well as across to the spaces that are on that level. And the intent was to provide that visibility, to provide that activity, the visual activity and the action, the inspiration that's going on within those spaces all day, so that the students see that work, be inspired by the work, and create interest and thought and inspiration of what's happening within the space. So these areas are surrounded by, in the majority of this section, by glass movable walls. So those are surfaces that can be moved open so that the entire area can be used, or just one room could be used, or the one wall could be opened up and a portion of this entire space could be used. There are also writing surfaces, so you could write on the glass surface and use it, as you can see in this particular rendering. And the inside of the space is a very functional and flexible space as well, providing this particular vantage point is looking from this location across the space to this wall right here, and that's the primary work wall, teaching wall, where there's a 20-foot section of gypsum wall or drywall that has a painted surface that can be written on. So essentially, the entire wall, the students can use as surfaces to write on for research or diagramming, etc. Flanking that wall is, we tried to maximize, based on the discussion with the user group, is to maximize the storage in that space and provide flexible storage. So what you're seeing here is a rendered depiction of storage units, wall units that have the ability to place either bins or wire bins, plastic bins, any type of storage unit with flexible storage or with flexible shelving. So the size and the configuration can be modified within these locations on either side of that writable surface. In addition to that, on each side there are two whiteboards that would be installed on vertical slides. So the whiteboard could be moved down and written on, moved up, storage behind it, so they'd move vertically and used interchangeably. Work can be, from one student's class can remain on the surface, the other one can move down, very flexible approach. We have a power in the ceiling, interactive projector that could project onto the writable surface here, also onto the floor for use with some gaming or images onto the floor itself. A trellis here, or a structure that could be used for hanging projects, weighing different types of elements, but used as part of the process for project-based instruction. There is we haven't identified exactly what furniture would be placed within these spaces, but we do know, in talking with the user groups, that it needs to be highly flexible. It needs to be something that can be, you can have two smaller groups, you can have an entire class, they can be moved around, as you can see with projects on the floor, projects with small groups, and maybe some larger instruction, but flexible in nature. We'll be going through that process over the next year, identifying exactly what the furniture looks like. You can see that there's a mix of natural lighting with the exterior windows within the project lab, as well as the end of the corridor that I mentioned with the daylighting and views, and then the balance of artificial daylighting as well that will be tied into the daylight dimming system within the project, that when the lighting levels on the outside increase, the artificial lighting in the classroom will decrease, in effect saving energy on the project. Any questions on space? One of the things that we talked about I'll just add, during the working group sessions, we talked about color and the fact that in these, as well as the other renderings, we'll be going through a process at the beginning of the construction phase that every project we go through that identifies all of the material colors. They'll be selected, will come before the building committee, will come before the working group, and get input from the administration on exactly what finishes will get what color. And that's from the vinyl floors to the paint on the walls to the seating in the auditorium, the fabric, everything down to the painting on the soffits. It's a pretty comprehensive process, and it will last several months when we go through that process. So it's exciting to see the renderings. It's also exciting to see the palette of materials that we will go through and talk with you about and identify exactly what colors would be appropriate for different areas in the building. And at that point, we'll talk through color theory and the effects of color and psychology of color, and talk a lot about it. That's a meeting in itself. So.
Right. See, there's in the corridor. There's a datum, at the top of the doors, 772, whatever. Is underneath that, are there areas for tacking posters or things like that?
Yeah, we identified, and because of the vantage point, it's tough to see exactly the area. On the plan and on the sections of the corridor, we have designated areas for tacking paper products, student work, because typically the fire department frowns upon, and actually there's actually under NFPA there's a requirement to make sure that we're less than, I believe, 10% of the entire surface. So it needs to be managed and controlled. So that's why we've identified specific areas within the classroom wing, as well as within this central core area with the display cases on this side, as well as display cases here. There are displays within this corridor, and then obviously the displays we talked about during the other meeting on the public spaces. So we've tried to control those zones in order to keep it either encased in behind glass and not just placed on the wall surface, and particularly the egress corridors.
A number of years ago, I think probably around the time of the nightclub fire, they changed the fire laws from where you could hang stuff in the building, and there are a specific number of feet from each doorway that you have to keep open, and there's a limit to how much overall. Yeah. It was quite a big transition for those of us who were teaching at the time and trying to display our students' work, and the space that we could do that in shrunk considerably.
I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
One more just comment on the we've had mixed results projecting onto whiteboards, especially sometimes when the marker doesn't completely get erased or things like that. We might consider having a projection screen maybe come down in front of that, particularly for clear images.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely, especially in maybe these locations within the building, would be pretty straightforward to have a projection screen come down. It's really, you bring up a good point with the finish of this surface. With the one of the things that we'll identify in the specifications is a very high level finish, meaning a level 5 finish, which is the smoothest finish you can get with a drywall product when finishing plaster or finishing drywall, because of just that piece of information that if it has any pitting whatsoever, then it will leave a shadow of what was drawn before. It's not a lot. Over time, you'll see a little bit of shadowing, but it's very important to make sure that that finish is a level 5 finish, and that's not uncommon for something like this.
Troy, at one of the working sessions, you explained about the floor penetration and how it looks like it could be a problem, but you've got experience with other schools that were done that they've not had a problem with that. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we talked about, and it occurs just about every single project, the idea of being able to have a penetration through the floor, seeing vertically through the first floor, second floor, and the idea that students will throw things down or start yelling to other students, whatever it may be. We have, on every single project that we have designed, let me just make sure, yeah, on every single project we've designed, we've had a scenario where we've had a penetration through the floor, first floor, second floor, or third floor, and we haven't received any negative feedback from anybody in any other town related to problems after construction that they've had with students and penetrations through the floor. So it's something that is asked every single project at the beginning of design, but we haven't had any comments back.
Thank you.
One of the things we talked about during our working sessions, which I think the group thought was a good idea, and it's a little different, so I just want to point it out here, is that when that display board in the picture on the upper left, we talked about having it be flush to the wall because it helps with operational costs in terms of cleaning. It's not an area they have to, corners have to be scraped, and the smoother the wall surface is, the less,
Yep.
the fewer the corners, the better. So it's just different than what you see, so I thought I mentioned.
Keeping this surface clean at the floor line so that that can just be continuous and less jogs in the
Yeah, one of the other points of discussion, I believe, at one of the working group meetings, and I don't recall who brought it up, but whoever it was, they have a very keen eye for detail, is in the opening going down to the first floor. In the rendering, there's space between the floor and the actual railing, and you know what Troy had mentioned is actually there'll be a kickboard or you know, something to obviously prevent something from rolling down if somebody dropped a pen or you know, something of that nature.
That was Jay, and he definitely has a very good eye for detail. And yeah, that just as Rich mentions, that the angle that you see here, the metal angle, will come up and provide that space for floor finish, the floor to finish to a material, and also for to eliminate anything rolling off of the floor and down onto the first floor. Yep.
Troy, you had mentioned, similar to what Peter was mentioning about jogs in the hallway wall, but there's also a limitation as to how much a jog could be under AAB and ADA as far as a blind student. What was that parameter? A limitation?
Yes, 4 inches is the maximum it can project within 27. It has to be within 27 inches of the floor line, and so that's when we go through this process. That's a consideration that we need to think about when that's redesigned. Yep.
If you could just note on the microphone, for the viewers at home, all these renderings are on the website if you want to look at them in more detail. So noted.
And the website is
www.asbc.us.
On the painted drywall surface, the writing surface, even with a level 5 finish, what kind of maintenance requirements are on that?
There's really no different as far as maintenance than a typical wall. It's a smoother surface. So what it does, like any drywall, if you get really close to a drywall surface, you'll see a variation in the surface finish. With a level 5, it's almost like glass. And so when there's a specific paint product that is applied to that surface when it's finished, that allows you to write on the surface just like a whiteboard. And that's there are several manufacturers that make it, and that's what would be applied to that drywall.
I'm just trying to understand the renderings a little. All the ceilings, the black or dark colored ceilings, are they solid ceilings? Are they acoustic fabric? What are they?
That's painted exposed deck and framing, and then these are suspended within that area. And these are a standard 2x4 and 2x6 grid with an integral LED light, strip light.
Are all the lights LED?
Yeah, the majority, 90% of the lights in the building. There will be some conditions, particularly in the theater area, that won't be LED, but that's the intent, is to have as much LEDs as possible in the project. In all the classroom lighting, all of the lighting that we talked about with these vertical fixtures, all of those are LED. The cans will be LED to try to minimize the overall watts per square foot within the building for the energy efficiency.
Why the exposed deck framing? Has that been found better for ventilation, or?
It's really breaking up a couple of reasons. I mean, this overall approach is less expensive than trying to put a 2x2, 2x4 grid from wall to wall in front to back. And this this provides easy access to the ceiling. The ventilation will be the same, whether you have the full ceiling or a partial ceiling, as shown here. So that's to vary it from just a standard 2x2 ceiling grid throughout the entire building.
The high impact drywall, have you had good durability with that?
Yeah, we have, and actually we have in the majority of the schools where we have drywall down low, we have installed impact resistant drywall, and in fact at the gymnasium in a few, actually gymnasium BC High, Boston College High School, there's plywood and drywall in there as well.
How about cleaning and durability for the writing surface? Is that something that needs to be? Yeah.
It would be just like a typical whiteboard, because of the material that's applied to that drywall is I don't remember like the number of scrubs it takes, like a paint would, but it would be similar to a typical whiteboard surface. It would require probably repainting or reapplying over at certain intervals. I don't know whether that's a year, 2 years, 5 years, but I can definitely get that info for you. Yeah.
Troy, in that upper top left rendering, is that a bank of lockers going down there on the left?
This right here?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And those occur in 3 locations on each corridor wing. So you have one in front of this classroom, this one, and that occurs also on each side. So each wing, there's 3 banks of lockers that are 12 by 12 by double stacked.
Mhm.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Will there be the linoleum flooring throughout, even in the classrooms?
No, the classrooms intended to be VCT. Yeah. All of the corridors in public spaces, public meaning the common spaces, would it's intended to have the linoleum, sheet linoleum.
But we are also looking at using perhaps sheet linoleum in the project learning lab, since
Right.
that's opening right up. So that's the one area where we're kind of trying to pull that into the space, since there's so much glass and it does open to the corridors and lobby area.
Yep, that's a good point. Mary is coming through this area as well, these 2 spaces, including those in the first and second.
Which type of surface is gonna hold up better with the moving of chairs and furniture?
Either surface is
Okay.
extremely durable, and they're widely used in both educational and institutional settings. The linoleum is it requires less maintenance than regular VCT, because there's no stripping or waxing for the linoleum. It's a greener product from an environmental standpoint.
I just see the maker space as a place where furniture's gonna be moved often.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you just say, the linoleum we're talking about is not the 1970s linoleum that your mother and father put in?
It's a really good point.
Just explain it.
Well, it's going to have like the kitchen that I grew up in, the square box. It's got like a tan, a dark tan,
Avocado green.
olive drab. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a completely different product. It's more durable, more malleable. It's used with natural materials, oils, and different natural ingredients. And it's a lower maintenance product. It won't have, like the linoleum back in the day had like a pad, and then the top surface was the hard surface, and it was highly glossy, and if you broke through that top surface, that was done. You're done. This is a solid material that the color is throughout, and it's adhered to the concrete fully, and is a very, very durable product.
You used it in the other schools you did?
Yep. Yeah.
Troy, what are the ceilings in the classrooms going to look like? Is it going to be more tile all the way across? Is it going to be similar to the hall, more like the project learning lab?
The classrooms will have 2x4 ceilings, wall to wall, with indirect, direct LED light fixtures, which will also be tied into the daylight dimming. Yep. And that's with the acoustics within that space, having the full acoustic value of the entire ceiling. It's important to maintain that wall-to-wall acoustic ceiling type.
And then there was some discussion, Scott, in the working group meetings about the restroom. I believe you said the ceilings in the restrooms will be solid ceilings, so that nothing could be stored, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, in the public restrooms, it's intended to have a solid gypsum ceiling. And then in the faculty restrooms, the unisex restrooms would be a 2x2 ceiling tile. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not using drywall in the bathrooms for the walls.
Right, that's right. That's it's all CMU, concrete masonry. Yep.
Right, for ease of maintenance and avoidance of vandalism.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Any other thoughts, questions? Thank you very much.
Scott, did you want to discuss the language tech labs?
Or, I'm sorry, yeah, Troy. Did you want to discuss the language tech labs, or do we want to have Mary?
Do you want me to talk
You
about
can,
that?
yep, go ahead.
So we just wanted to make you aware that over the last couple of weeks, we've talked a lot about particularly the educational spaces. And one of the items that has recently come up from the high school staff is that in the high school area, we have, I believe, 3 different types of computer labs. Here, and then a tech business lab here. The first is a standard academic lab, which we had set up in rows of seating with computer terminals at each. The second lab we had talked about is a language lab, which is a very specific technical lab based on language lab components and furnishings, which quite often have carrels at every learning position. And then the last is a business tech lab with a slightly smaller enrollment for the classroom, which it was asked to have a very flexible space for there so they could learn in different areas and through different types of equipment. Having talked to the administrators at the high school, what they've asked is that we try to have a more global approach to all of these labs so that they are more flexible spaces, and that we move away from a specific design language lab to a lab that could be set up for a minor language lab through computer equipment, or it can be used for various computer training. So we are starting to look into that. Terry Sullivan was very helpful to supply us with some information and a video about a college computer lab setup that she's more interested in, which is again in more kind of mods in each section of the building rather than the rows or aisles of computer stations. And so we're working on that. We want to just make you aware that we are getting away from that very specific language lab because they were just concerned that it's a pretty premium cost on one of those labs, and it takes out some of the flexibility of the specific classroom location. So we'll probably have updates on those locations as we move further and advance the design.
Mary, did you also want to discuss the lighting along Glen Oaks Way?
Yes, lighting along Glen Oaks Way. One of the alternates is included in the proposed project was a section of light improvement along Glen Oaks Way where we have those new parking spaces. They're angled parking spaces at that front natural turf field. Jason was kind enough to point out that the school department currently takes care of those lights, and the underground infrastructure and the basis for the lights are in worn condition, or they've been in place a long time. So there's a bit of a concern on our part that if we start to work on a section of those lights, what could we possibly be getting into with regard to the infrastructure underground that may be in difficult condition and trying to rework it. So we did send an email, Rich Testa did send an email to Rick LaFawn, just making him aware of our concerns with regard to the bases of the lights and also the underground infrastructure. The plan we had for doing only a section of those lights as an improvement as part of this project, and asking if the town could take a more global approach to improving the underground infrastructure and the lighting along Glen Oaks Way with National Grid. Rick has in turn reached out to National Grid. They have gotten back in touch with us to ask to have a meeting with the engineers, the architect, members of the school district, the town, and the building committee to talk about options that are available for site lighting, also to talk about our new service for the building, to talk about the energy designs for the building where they could possibly help us out with some ideas on energy saving items or some future rebates that might be available. So I'm working with Rick on that. We were hoping to meet the week after vacation week, but I haven't gotten a response back from the National Grid rep, so we'll let you know as soon as we get some kind of update from them on when that meeting is going to take place.
Mayor, is that part of that whole discussion, National Grid, is to try to resolve, right now, as I understand it, the power comes out of the existing high school to light up all of Glen Oaks Way, because that's the first building that was constructed.
Yes.
So in the future, I think we're going to try to segregate the street lighting, or if
Well,
it's possible?
It's actually twofold. The first part of it is that when we tear the existing high school down, we're gonna remove the power source for the lights. And so that led into the whole infrastructure of the lights themselves and how they're powered in the service. But it's also the idea that that is a public way now, and that it should probably be taken back over by National Grid to provide proper lighting facilities and infrastructure for that road, and that's what we're working with Rick on.
Mary, could I ask you to discuss contractor pre-qualification?
Yes. Under state construction laws, there is a section of the law which was added in, I think it was 2004, where they have added not only are contractors who perform work on public projects, vertical construction, building construction, required to be DCAM certified. That's the Division of Capital Asset Management. Certifies contractors to say that they have the ability, they have the bonded capacity and the insurance to be able to perform work for you. And they have different dollar values they're certified for and different trades they're certified for. They added a caveat to that law which allowed for local municipalities and local owners to have greater input or control over who is qualified to work on your projects. So any project that's $10 million or higher is now required to follow a pre-qualification procedure for both general contractors and for all file sub-bid trades. And I think we'll have probably 18 file sub-bid trades on this project. And what the process entails, it's very specific on what you need to do. You have to appoint a pre-qual committee. That pre-qual committee has to be a group of 4 individuals. It's required by the Commonwealth regulations and the law that that committee is made up of the architect or designer of record for the project. If there is an OPM that's required for a project, that OPM has to be on, the pre-qual committee, and then 2 members of the building committee need to be on that committee. Now, the committee can delegate responsibilities to various members of either the town or the building committee, but ultimately the review, evaluation, and pre-qualification is done by that committee of 4 representatives. So the first part is we will need to put a committee together. We are planning on starting that process in the next month or so. We've got put together the pre-qual requirement, our pre-qual RFQ for both the GC and the file subbidders. It's a standard document that's issued by the state, and you just fill in what trades need to be pre-qualified and the dollar amounts that they need to be pre-qualified for. So our general contractor would be a contractor who has the ability to perform the work on a project that's $78 million, so we don't end up having a contractor who is smaller bidding on the project. The file sub-bid trade similarly will have those dollar values assigned to it. Electrical, I think we're at $6 or $7 million for this project, so again, that's an area where we want to make sure we have a company that is qualified, has sufficient manpower, and has experience during that larger project. So the process is to appoint that 4-person committee, which obviously a representative from KBA would need to be involved and a representative of AI3. Then you advertise or put a solicitation out for the statement of qualifications. That's done through a local newspaper, and ComBuys, which is a new feature from the state, and also in Central Register, which is a state publication talking about bidding opportunities. Felicia's been working, and so has Rick LaFond, on doing the different legal notices that we need to do. We will then issue an RFQ for file subbidders and an RFQ for general contractors. We typically receive all the responses on the same day, and then we will go through an evaluation process, which includes reviewing the ownership, the project managers put forward for the project, the prior experience of those managers, the prior experience of the company, both on public work and non-public work, credit references, legal proceedings, debarments or terminations, and the status of their DCAM certification, their update statements, and the amount of work they currently have on the books. So that process, you can imagine, takes quite a bit of time. We'll probably receive overall 60 to 70 submissions from different contractors, and then we will establish a list of qualified contractors who the building committee will invite to bid on this project. So once we get past this project, we will not do a public notice on the bid itself. We will invite the trades pre-qualified to bid on the project, and then they obtain the bid plans and specs from the architect. So I think that pretty much gives you the outline. And I can give anyone the references in state law and the Commonwealth regulations if you want to take a look at and understand the proceedings.
Great, thank you. And could I, while you're up there, just ask you lastly to provide a budget update?
So included in the agenda is a budget update. It does include all of the contract amendments that we have processed so far. It also includes all the payments submitted to date for the project. And we are still tracking at or below budget.
Very good.
All right, are there any additional items for discussion, not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to schedule our future meetings.
Rick, can we talk about the pre-qual committee, just because I need to have that committee assigned before I can
Yes.
issue an RFQ?
Absolutely. What would you, let me ask you, Mary, on a typical pre-qual committee, obviously, as you had indicated, you have an owner's project manager and the designer. Who are the typical other two members?
Yeah, very typically, building committees will assign someone who is somewhat locally available and has some type of a business or so background or a construction background, or has a direct connection to the need to have good contractors involved in the construction of the facility, such as a director of maintenance or a superintendent or the assistant superintendent for business. It's usually someone from the school department is also included, because ultimately they're the final user of the building, and we always like to have them have direct input on who we're pre-qualifying for these projects, so we're comfortable moving forward that we're going to have the building that we want.
And what would we anticipate a time commitment would be?
It's again 60 to 70. We would hope that we would have 2 sessions of maybe an hour, a couple hours to talk through each of the pre-quals, because individuals can't just pre-qual. We all have to agree that these people should be pre-qualled. So the biggest part of it is the legwork on doing reference calls, etc. Typically, depending on who's on the committee and the comfort levels, we will assign certain trades to certain people. Oftentimes, either the architect or myself will take some of the MEP trades, because we know those contractors a little bit better, and we understand those systems a little bit better. Some of the finished trades, etc. And that can also, if you have a director of maintenance, may want to be involved in that too, because they understand those companies, that trade. Some of the other finishes might be more other committee members, because they just understand the nature of the business and make those calls. Or it can be more just reviewing. A banker understands credit references better than I understand credit references, but I understand construction safety ratings better than a banker would. So you kind of meet first to figure out how you want to distribute the load of getting through all the documentation, and then have your reviews and then your final evaluation.
Okay, and the committee can be no larger than 4.
Yeah.
And can we, I believe you indicated we could potentially delegate some of?
Yes, I mean, it can be a situation where you can ask other individuals in the building committee or even at the school department to help you with reference calls. Because the reference call is the most important part of this. All the rest of the documentation we can review pretty quickly. We'll understand their safety ratings. We'll understand if they've had litigation against them. We'll understand if they've been debarred. But in the process, I felt, and I'm sure Troy feels the same, nothing beats calling someone on the phone and actually asking them through the process of how was this company. A lot of times the initial response will be, oh, they were fine. Well, how were they with this and how were they with that? And then you get more of a better understanding of the overall performance of a contractor, rather than having a single answer, they were fine.
It sounds as if someone from the school department makes very good sense.
Michelle.
Jay Lynn.
And Felicia willingly accepts that nomination, I imagine.
Would it be appropriate for Jay and I to represent the building committee, if that's what the building committee would?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, yeah.
I mean, Sorry, Jay.
Do we need to take a little action on that?
As long as there's a general consensus, that's fine. You don't need to vote on who's being appointed, as long as it's general consensus, and I'll just note for the record that that's who the appointment was to. And certainly, if others are willing to help with calls or, you know, what we'll do too is once I get the the registry of who's submitted, I'll try to send that out to everyone too, so that you see the names on that list too and get a good understanding of how many people have submitted and the quality of the companies just on name value alone.
So I was just going to actually say that we have a lot of building and technical experience in the row of people sitting just in front of me. And if they would be interested in helping us with that, that would be greatly appreciated. It's their backyard.
Absolutely. And I would ask, as Mary said, that they'll communicate that information. And I would say if you are available and willing to assist in any of those references and you have past experience, you know, I've found that future performance is born out of past experience, so both negative and positive. So if you have past experience, we would certainly welcome that feedback and input.
Mary, can you just tell me the procedure? So as this group kind of weeds out those who are interested and pre-qualifies them, someone who's not pre-qualified, do they have an appealed way, or do they just have to accept the decision?
So as part of the process, we will send a letter to those who are pre-qualified to let them know that they've been pre-qualified. And what I missed in saying earlier is that we also have to send a letter to those who weren't qualified and let them know they were not qualified. Those companies have the right to ask for a copy of their evaluation. But the law is pretty clear and the regulation is pretty clear that the decision of the building committee is final. And in this process, because we're going to be reviewing so many, it really is important for us to use due diligence, time, and make really well thought out decisions on this, because to open appeal process to 70 or 80 different contractors is really just going to bog down the process. So it's good that the regulations are written that way, because it really means that, you know, due diligence, due thoughtfulness, come out with a group of contractors you feel are qualified to perform, and allow them the opportunity to understand why they possibly were not qualified, but that's the extent of where you would bring it. And the contractors can only ask for their own evaluation. They cannot review anyone else's evaluation.
Great. Thank you.
Great. All right, so do we have a general consensus that Lynn and Felicia will represent the committee on the pre-qual committee?
No problem.
Very good, thank you. All right, scheduling of future meetings. We do not have a working group meeting tomorrow.
Correct.
We will have a working group meeting the following Friday, so
No.
Friday,
No.
no, that's school
School
vacation
vacation.
week. I would be the only one there. That's
Peter
not true.
and I,
Administration
and
would
Jay.
be there. That's not true. So the next working group meeting is scheduled for Friday, May 1st,
Correct.
7:30 a.m. at the North School. What would be a reasonable time frame, Mary, to schedule our next full building?
Do you want May 5th or May 12th? You think you want May 12th? May 5th? Okay. May 5th?
I'd ask, is it at all possible to look at the 7th that week instead of the 5th?
Yeah, that's fine with me. Yeah.
Thursday the 7th. Is there any conflict for the school administration?
What day? May 7th?
Thursday, May 7th. All right.
We'll try to secure this room and we'll confirm that Thursday.
Okay.
That's the first Thursday of the month, right?
Yeah,
Right.
correct. Okay, so our next full school building committee meeting will be held May 7th at 6 p.m. and tentatively scheduled for the community room at the police station, but that'll be confirmed once we check availability. Any other business to come before the committee?
Just one note for everyone who's here.
The website, and we're still trying to work out the upgrades that the town just recently made. There's a concern right now that our subscriber list is not connected with the new website, so I'm trying to work that out with the town's IT professional to see if we can save that old subscriber list, or we may have to send out an email through the school to ask people to sign up again. Yeah, we're not sure yet. Yeah. Yeah, I think we should re-invite.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you. If there's no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion?
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Discussion, opposed, hearing none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Mary, when did the RFPs
Sorry about that.
do that?
That's all.
Oh, were you at the meeting when I was talking about this? I said, he came to me and they had two.
We're not kidding.
I said,
There won't be many that wait till the last minute just because it's not a it's a package thing. So it's 6 copies of the all package. Most of them come in like paper readers. So you're just sort of working it.
Multiply.